On the 20th of February 1991, Keltie had just completed a fantastic show with Tilikum and the two females. The crowded house was soaking it up, marveling at the orcas' speed, agility, and strength as they performed in the pool in front of them. Keltie began cleaning up as the audience filed out of the area at the end of the show, and that's when it happened. Keltie realized how important it was to establish a relationship with the animals she dealt with as an animal trainer. She had no clue that her part-time employment would one day cost her life when she was assigned to train the orcas. This is the story of Tilikum's first victim, Keltie Byrne. Imagine being ripped away from your family at the tender age of 2. This is precisely the heart-wrenching tale of Tilikum, the orca made infamous by the documentary Blackfish. His story serves as a jarring reminder of the dark underbelly of the glitz, glamour, and deadly accidents associated with marine amusement parks. In the eyes of the public, Tilikum was a showstopper, but behind the scenes, his life was a theater of cruelty. To understand the horror that unfolded on that fateful day, it's essential to delve into the life Tilikum led behind closed doors, or, more accurately, behind steel gates and concrete walls. The world knew him as a star performer, a magnetic presence that could awe audiences with a splash of his tail. But this facade was a cruel illusion, much like a mirage in a desert that promises water but delivers only sand. In essence, Tilikum was a brilliant mind in a concrete prison. It's similar to confining a virtuoso musician in a soundproof room, deprived of instruments, audience, and even the echo of his own melody. For a creature of such astonishing intellect and complex social needs, his enclosure became an inescapable psychological labyrinth. Making his life even more unbearable were his cellmates, 2 older, dominant female orcas who made sure to remind him of his lowly status in their confined hierarchy. The term bullying barely scratches the surface. It's like throwing a newcomer into a prison yard and watching as they get pushed around by the seasoned inmates. Tilikum had no reprieve, no sanctuary to retreat to, no family to console him. He was cornered, with his stress and anxiety amplifying each day. For anyone who's ever felt the suffocating grip of loneliness while surrounded by others, you'll understand the unbearable weight of Tilikum's existence. He wasn't just physically confined, he was emotionally and mentally shackled too. This cocktail of deprivation and duress set the stage for the tragedy that followed, creating a ticking time bomb that was waiting to explode. And explode it did, resulting in a loss that shocked the world. But let's not forget that before he was a killer, Tilikum was a victim, a captive soul molded by an environment devoid of empathy or understanding. Now, as we lift the curtain on these uncomfortable truths, we must confront the question, how many more Tilikums are out there, hidden behind the spectacle, waiting for their stories to be told? And more pressingly, what are we willing to do about it? February 20th, 1991 is a date that forever changed our perception of marine parks and the seemingly joyous spectacle they provide. Keltie Byrne was the epitome of youthful exuberance, a budding marine biologist ready to dive into her life's passion. Her days revolved around the symphony of splashes and cheers at Canada's Sealand. On that fateful morning, the sun kissed the surface of the water, the audience roared in anticipation, and the orcas, Tilikum, Nuka, and Haida, put on a mesmerizing show. And then the unthinkable happened, a narrative swerve that no one could have scripted. It's as though you're watching a heartwarming movie, and suddenly, the screen glitches to reveal a horrifying scene you can't unsee. When Keltie slipped and fell into the water, what followed was not just an accident, but a catastrophic failure of understanding. Tilikum, seeing her in his domain, gripped her foot in his massive jaws and pulled her into the depths. Imagine a child coming across a piece of delicate china, fascinating yet fragile. The child might grasp it, enthralled, but the outcome is inevitable. Something is going to break. And it did. As Tilikum dragged her around like a new toy, Keltie's panicked cries, "I don't want to die," ricocheted off the walls, searing themselves into the memories of the onlookers and staff. Those last desperate words reverberate today, a haunting reminder that a tragedy like this can happen again if we don't change the conditions that led to it. It's as if every splash in marine parks worldwide is punctuated by Keltie's plea, creating a chilling symphony that underscores the plight of both human and animal lives affected by captivity. And so we must ask, what are the lessons here, waiting to be unearthed like clues at a crime scene? How can we ensure that Keltie's voice is not just an echo, but a catalyst for change? Shockwaves pulsed across the globe. Keltie became the first person to be killed by a captive killer whale. The painful 2-hour saga that followed, watching the orcas play with Keltie's lifeless body before staff could finally retrieve it, was as grim as it was telling. The aftermath of Keltie Byrne's tragedy was not just a wake-up call, it was the blaring alarm of a system in critical failure. Much like when a seemingly perfect machine suddenly grinds to a halt, emitting smokes and sparks, revealing its hidden malfunctions. Paul Spong, the director of Orca Lab and a keen observer of orca behavior, succinctly said, "The incident was waiting to happen." His words were the final nail in the coffin of the notion that marine parks were idyllic paradises for both humans and animals. It wasn't just Keltie who was trapped. Tilikum, Nuka, and Haida were prisoners of an unjust system. For years, these majestic beings were relegated to a life similar to a carnival show. Entertain and be fed, disappoint and be punished. The system didn't just fail Keltie, it failed all those majestic creatures by stripping them of their natural habitat and behaviors. Imagine placing a marathon runner on a treadmill for life, restricting their strides and curbing their spirit. That's what these parks did to orcas. The agonizing 2-hour period after Keltie's death, where staff and emergency responders could do nothing but watch the orcas play with her lifeless body, underscored the urgency for reform. It was as if the orcas themselves were sending a message, a scream for help that humanity couldn't afford to ignore. The incident was a catalyst, forcing us to confront uncomfortable questions about the ethics of captivity and animal entertainment. Just like a house of cards, one wrong move led to the collapse of the illusion that had been so carefully built around marine parks. A year later, Sealand was no more. It folded under the weight of its own ethical contradictions and public scrutiny. Tilikum, Nuka, and Haida were relocated, but the psychological scars endured, a lasting imprint of a system fundamentally flawed. So we must ask ourselves, what does it take for society to recognize the ethical bankruptcy of keeping such sentient beings in captivity? When will we learn that some lives can't be caged? The closing of Sealand and the transfer of Tilikum to a seemingly better facility in Orlando's Seaworld might appear as steps forward. But let's be clear, moving from one prison cell to a slightly bigger one is not freedom. It's like giving someone who has been starved a single meal and expecting gratitude. Tilikum's psychological wounds were deep, and they festered in his new environment, leading him to act out yet again. The story doesn't end with Keltie Byrne. Tragically, Tilikum was involved in 2 more fatal incidents after being transferred to Seaworld in Orlando. First was Daniel Dukes in 1999, who snuck into Seaworld and was found draped over Tilikum the next morning. The second was Dawn Brancho in 2010, an experienced trainer. During a live show, Tilikum pulled her underwater, leading to her tragic demise. It's as if each tragedy were a morbid chapter in a book that should have never been written. And yet, the ink dries, the pages turn, but the narrative remains the same. These incidents serve as grim bookmarks, reminding us that Tilikum's actions were not isolated events, but a pattern, a recurring nightmare that questions the very fabric of our ethical tapestry. The ink of tragedy dried, not once, not twice, but thrice. Each dark chapter with Tilikum at its center raises haunting questions that reverberate through our collective conscience. Are we willing to recognize the repeating pattern here? Daniel Dukes, Dawn Brancho, and Keltie Byrne weren't outliers in an otherwise neutral narrative. They were casualties of a system that had fundamental flaws. When a book has so many dark chapters, it's time to question the authors. In this case, the authors are us, society. Each life lost under Tilikum's enormous flippers leaves an indelible mark, challenging us to confront the uncomfortable truth that we are responsible. It's like watching a horror movie and slowly realizing you're not just a spectator, you're also the director. The cost of our collective ignorance is not just counted in orca lives, it's counted in human lives too. Each tragedy offers society a mirror, forcing us to look at our reflection, warts and all. Are we willing to heed these cautionary tales, or will we continue to avert our gaze? It's time we face the unsettling truth. Some lives can't and shouldn't be caged. And until we confront this harsh reality, we're merely setting the stage for the next tragedy, penning the script for the next devastating headline. What are you willing to do to ensure that this cycle ends? Now, it's your turn to speak. Share this story, comment on it, or subscribe to our channel for more revealing tales like this. What do you think society should do to prevent such tragic outcomes? What can we do to respect the lives and freedom of all creatures? The tale of Tilikum and Keltie is not just a story, it's a clarion call for action. Will you answer it?